Hey everyone, it's Phalos360, and today we are going to talk about how to use the Bazaar to do price checks, look up raw parts, look up reverse engineered parts, look up crafted parts, and do your own price checks and check the loot that you have looted in space from killing NPCs. So to get started, we have a couple of different parts in our inventory that we're going to go ahead and check today. One cool new update that Star Wars Galaxy Legends has made is going to be adding color coding to the rare stats on the items that you loot. So no longer do you have to use the STC or the STAJ and your keeper toss. You can just loot parts and it will tell you immediately when you have looted a decent part. Now, one thing to keep in mind when watching this video, I do have a custom Spaceloot.txt, and because of that, mine is going to look a little bit different than yours. Yours should have some type of tier. My tiers are just $signs, and unless you really have a great handle on the different stats that you're seeing, I would just leave it as the default. It's very close to the STAJ, and it's really good right out of the box. But for at least for this video, you'll be seeing mine, and it doesn't have the tiers. That is okay, because I'm going to show you how to check loot regardless of the tier that you see, and the tiers can actually help come in handy when you're checking this loot. So, first thing you're going to do is open up the Bazaar terminal. You're going to always click into vendor location, entire galaxy, ship component. You can search all auctions, entire galaxy. However, there is a price cap, and the only people that are going to be listing items here are ones that do not have a trader to put down a vendor in their house. You might find items here, but it will be less likely. Most people are going to sell items on a vendor using the vendor location button. So, vendor location, entire galaxy, ship component. This is where we're going to find almost all of the parts that we want to look up. Now, just to get started into the raw parts, because a lot of questions that I'm hearing lately are, I just looted this part, it has pretty colors, and I have no idea how much it's worth. How do I check? Who can tell me how much this is worth? Well, the answer is you can check, and the answer is always going to be different the majority of the time. Star Wars Galaxies Legends has a player-based economy, so depending on the supply and demand and what players consider a certain part to be worth, now that's what's going to determine its value, and they can list that part on the Bazaar for whatever price they want. And because of that, you get competition and different prices. Maybe today a part is going to be worth 1 credit, but tomorrow it might be worth 100,000 credits. You never really know, which means that you should always check the prices that day that you loot the part before you're going to go sell them, if you want to sell them. Maybe you just want to look up the price and see what awesome loot you just got. So, to get started, we will look up this capacitor. And one thing to keep in note about capacitors and shields is that they have a bit of a fraction right here. So for the energy on a capacitor, or for the shield HP on a shield, always go off of the denominator, because that's what's really going to matter. Maybe you use this part in space and you got a couple of shots fired, now you don't have as much energy and you immediately land before it has a chance to recharge. It's not going to recharge all the way back up until you launch back into space, so you could see 0 right here. The one that matters the most is going to be the denominator, because as soon as you launch back into space, it's going to start kicking back up and eventually be full. So that brings us to, how do I look up this part? Well, it is a raw part, and when I say raw, I mean that I killed an NPC and the NPC dropped this. It also has this very awesome indicator, which is reverse engineering level. A RE'd part like this gun will not have that same attribute. Instead, it has reverse engineered yes. So that is the attribute that you see there. Now, the ship equipment certification is really only useful for when you're leveling up to ace, but it's also useful whenever you're trying to look up a part on the Bazaar, depending on if you're looking up a already reverse engineered item like this weapon, or when you're looking up a raw part. Now, when you're looking up a raw part, we're not going to use this equipment certification. We're only really focused on two things: the highlighted stat and the reverse engineering level. But let me jump on into it. This is how we're going to look it up. We're going to first click on capacitor because that's what this is. Next, we have two filters already in the box, but for the sake of this video, I'm going to remove them and show you exactly how I got them in the first place. Usually when you click on this, you're not going to have this filter. So click Enable Item Attribute Filter. You're also not going to have this checkbox checked. So make sure it's checked. Item must have attribute. Otherwise, you're basically telling the game that this filter doesn't need to have this attribute and that it's meaningless, and you get a whole bunch of really weird filters, or really weird results. Next, we want to look up a threshold. We could just look up the exact stat, 2706, on both min and max value. However, if we do that, we are not going to find anything. And that's because there's no other part on the Bazaar that has this exact stat. So we need to find a threshold of above and below. Now, do we look for, only 1 mass different, 5 mass different, 1,000 mass different? So there's a couple of tools that will help you figure this out. One tool is the SWG 2.0 browser edition. Another would be Seraph's Loadout tool. Another tool would be the in-game SWG you can access if you drag or if you download that text file and you enter it into your game directory. Then you can do load SWG.txt, the name of the file. It will say alias is loaded, and then you can also look up C4. So for just basic C4, it gives you the D tier, which mine is a little bit better than that. So we would look up C4. Let's try C tier. Right, so this one, it's still a little bit better than C tier, so maybe we'll look up C4 B tier, and I know that it's somewhere between C at 2800 and B at 2600. So those are actually two really good thresholds. You could also look on the Seraph's Loadout tool in the RE Calculator tab, which if you go to capacitor 4, you get the SWG rarity tiers in the below window right here, and you can see that again it's right in between C and B. Also, you could just use the web STAJ and look up C4, and again you'll see it's between C and B, or actually C and C in this case, but that's okay. So we have some thresholds to play with. Let's go ahead and just do 2600 and 2800. So when we add this filter in, we'll remove the other one, we also need that reverse engineering level filter, because if we don't add it, we might find capacitors that are number one, any level that has that mass, or they might even be reverse engineered already. And we're not interested in that. We only want to know what the raw part is going for. So one thing to keep a note here, for raw parts, do not add any other stats. If you add another stat, you're basically telling them that it needs to have this stat plus your good stat, and these could vary like very, very widely. So we only are interested in just the good stat. Most parts will drop with only one good stat. Sometimes they could drop with more, but for the instance of this one, we're just going to look up this one good stat. We have 25 search results. Now, some of the ones at the bottom here are not really close to the one that I have. It's good another 100 points away. So those are 50k, but they're all kind of in the high 2700s, if you can see that on the screen. So we can narrow our search a little bit to get a little bit, closer results. If we do 2750 right here and we hit update, it's going to update our filter, and now we can see that we have a lot less results, and the results are a little bit closer to the price level that we're probably looking to put this up for. So this one is still a little bit heavier than the one that I have, and it's for 2.5 mil. Now if we look right here, we have another one that is a little bit better than this stat, because again, you want the mass to be as low as possible. However, that one's at 5 mil, so we're probably looking somewhere in between these numbers or close to one of them. If we right click on that and we do details, we get this window right here, and this also tells us how long it's been on the Bazaar for. When you first put a part on the Bazaar on your terminal, it will have 45 days, or if you're in a player city that has the extra perks, since the city update patch came out, it might even be up to like 80 some days. I think it goes up to 85. I don't remember 100% on the point there. But either way, this one's been on the Bazaar for a really long time, for 2.5 mil, and has not sold yet. So we're kind of thinking that, you know, this stat might actually not go for this price very quickly. Considering that, we'll look at the other one. This one's also been up for quite some time. So when we think about that, if I want my C4 mass stat to sell quick, I'd probably want to put a price closer to this lower threshold. Maybe I'll just match that price and put it up for 2.5 mil with a slightly better stat, and then when somebody searches for C4s, they'll buy mine first. So that's just a C4 that we had looked up. Now, there's also some parts that can get a little bit tricky to look up. For example, refire rates and versus shields and armor. Now, these have breaking points because of rounding. Now, what I mean by that is this part, a 384, you should round this by putting it into a ship and then logging out. And when you come back in, it will have rounded this third place up or down. You don't always want to round. In some cases, rounding is actually really bad. But for this particular one, this reverse engineering level 10 weapon, we do want to round. So we can use the Seraph's loadout tool right here to check if we want to round that. So we go to weapon, and we go to weapon level 10, and we go to refire rate and type in .384 because that was the stat that we had, and it's going to tell us that round before Arene guaranteed to improve the outcome. And as you can see, when we best case and worst case when rounded, it's going to be .35, but if we don't round it, that it's going to end up .36. And because of this, we also want to look up a little bit different thresholds in the Bazaar when we go to search for this stat for a price check. And just as a heads up, you can find the thresholds by playing around in here. If you put in a 5, it says round before Arene may improve outcome. So this one's not guaranteed. It's what we call a gamble. And if you have this, I would usually price closer to the worst case outcome. However, it's really up to you. Now, on that same side, if we put 7.6, this one is probably going to come out, 3.5. So rounding's not going to affect the outcome on that one. You don't even need to round, right? However, if it were on the 5, there's a chance that it might come out 3.4. Round before Arene may improve outcome. To be honest, in cases like this, you might as well round because worst case scenario, you're going to get, the exact same as before, but if you round, you might get a free upgrade. So, always round before you sell. It's better for you because you don't have to price at a gamble. Most people don't like to buy gambles, and you might just get the free upgrade that you need and be able to just sell at the higher price. But again, it's really up to your discretion on whether or not you want to round. However, let's put that into play when we look up the price for this part. So I already have the reverse engineering level 10 filter in because again, this is a raw part, so we want to look up the reverse engineering level, and I've already put in the stat for this part. So, however, I put them in a little bit wrong here. So we want to look up, remember, .384 is the highest within that threshold, and .376, oh, I have these swapped, sorry, .376 and .384. So this is the range that we want to be looking in because after we RE it, if they rounded correctly, any stat within this range is going to come out the same, so all of these parts should be worth the same amount of money. And these are really easy to price check because you can basically just price match the cheapest price. But again, you can always look up how long that's been sitting there. And that hasn't been there very long. Let's check the other one. Also hasn't been there very long. Check this one. Not very long. Most of these are pretty new on the Bazaar. You can see this one sat for a little bit longer, and as the price goes up, you'll see this one sat for even longer. So, based on that, you'll want to price somewhere in this range. If you're feeling like you don't mind waiting, maybe you price a little bit higher, hoping that these cheaper ones get sold first, and then somebody buys yours. If you just want it to sell quick, you could undercut, price match, or even just go somewhere in between these. So that's how you would price check a part that you have looted that is raw. Now, the same kind of goes if you're trying to look up a stat. Let's say that you use the STAJ on your weapon 10 refire rate, and you want to find some matching parts for that, right? So .384 is what you're going to put in here. Well, it's going to give you the matching stats as long as you've selected the right one. So this is the STAJ recommended stats right here, and you could use those same tactics that we just went through to look up raw part for price checks to then find the different raw stats on the Bazaar and see how much they would cost you. So just for example, we'll go with something that is a, let's do 3809 mass. Right? And the mass, we'll find a threshold for that. It looks like the threshold is anywhere between like 1.5k mass in between. We'll look up 750 on each side. So the thresholds we'll use will be 38750, and also we're going to use 37250. So come to the mass and 37250, as well as 38750. Right, so this is right in between the ranges that for the value we want, and as you can see here, we just got some results. This one's almost right on the money for 8 mil, and this one's a little bit better for 10 mil, a little bit better for 13 mil. So you can see we can then go and waypoint to vendor and buy that for our project to try to complete this in RE a matching part. Now let's say that you already have the RE part and you want to try to price check it. This is where it gets a little bit different. Instead of using the reverse engineering filter, reverse engineering level filter and the mass filter, we're going to remove this one. We're going to add in 2 filters that I like to always use for reverse engineered parts, looking them up or price checking them. We're going to use reverse engineered, yes, because again we have that attribute. Then we're also going to add that ship equipment certification level so that it knows we're looking for that weapon 10. Always make sure you have that item must have attribute checked. Now when I hit refresh, I'm going to find only reverse engineer level 10 parts, and as you can see, that's what we have, a whole bunch, a lot of them. Now let's say I want to look up the price for this one. So when you look up a reverse engineered part, you can add all of these stat filters, as many as you want. Again, you're going to want to have somewhat of a threshold, but you can use the STAJ in-game, out-of-game, or even the Seraph's Loadout tool to do that. Just for this one, we're going to do mass of 400. We're going to do 500 apart, 500, and hit add. We're going to also add the damage. Well, let's add the drain first. I like to add mass and drain, so we'll add the drain in here. 1530. I'm going to do 1550 as a max value, and for min we'll do 1500. We'll just search off these two. There's not a lot of results. This is a pretty nice weapon, and you can see here this is the only one that we'll have in that result category. And as far as lining up, 24 EPS, 24.5, you want a lower EPS the better, so this one's a little bit better on the EPS. Same versus armor and shields, refire rate is the same. The damage on this one's a hair lower on the max and a hair higher on the min. The mass is a little bit lower than this one, and the drain is a little bit lower. So you could think that, to be honest, these would be priced pretty similarly. If I wanted to sell my gun, maybe I price at the same price. Maybe I mark it a little bit lower if I want it to sell faster. Maybe I mark it a little bit higher if I don't mind waiting. This one was just put on the Bazaar though. It's nice and fresh, and it's a really nice gun overall. Now, for anything that's really over 40 mil, I also recommend that you get a price check in a player Discord. So there's a couple of different really big discords for space in SWGLegends. You can go to the main official Legends Discord. You could go to the Black Flag, the Spaceloot. You could go to Magic Guild Discord. Just a couple of the bigger ones, and if you ask for a price check in any one of those discords, most of the time you'll get a pretty good answer. There's a lot of really helpful pilots in those discords. So, and I would do that really for anything more than 40 mil if it looks that way on the Bazaar, right? So one other thing that we're going to look into is crafted parts. And just for a heads up, the way I just looked up this gun, if you wanted to look up a gun to buy for like a reverse engineered gun to buy, you can do that the same way with the exact same filters and just search through the results to see what guns are in your range. Usually I would try to find a range for maybe like a mass that fits in my ship and a gen that I know my ship will be powered by. And one way to guarantee that you have that information is to use Seraph's Loadout tool. It's a really awesome tool, and you can see it here. One thing to note that almost everybody messes up on is that on this main page, the only places you should be typing are loadout name and chassis mass. You should not type into any of these main bubbles. If you see when I double click on here, there's this really fancy complex filter, or not filter, but calculation in here, and we don't want to remove that. We don't want to change that. We just want to leave that alone. So the way you do it is you click on the arrow. It's going to take you to the tab at the bottom where you enter in the stat that you want. Once you've entered in your stat for the part you have, you click on the arrow to go back, or you can click down here to go back. It's going to run the script. Sometimes it's just quicker to click here and hit dismiss. And then once your part's in there, you can click on it in here, and it'll automatically fill that out for you. So never change the formulas in here. It's going to mess up your tool. All of your different calculations in here are going to break, and you won't get any of these awesome different informational tabs working as they should. Also, by the way, your RE calculator is right here, just so that you can play with all of that stuff. You can save projects, load projects, even export them directly into your weapon so you don't have to type it out more than once. And that being said, another thing that we look up is crafted parts. How do I get a crafted booster per se? What I like to do is click directly into this category one more time so that I can see all of these names of every single possible item in the game. So for example, the crafted boosters are going to be your Kuwait Drive Yard experimental boosters, which are the collection boosters. You also have the basic crafted ones, which would be like a Mark I booster. As you can see, you have a ton of options in here to choose from, and you can even use your price filter at that point to find the best one, and even still use the item attribute filter to find the cheapest one with the best stats. For these, I would say it works very similar into an RE'd one, but you don't really need to select the reverse engineering yes or the ship equipment certification, because you already have selected the exact level and level of part that you want. In this case, it's going to be like the mark of crafted, right? So you only want to look for the stats that would be on the booster at that point. So again, if you look at the BR1X, this is the crafted collection booster. These are the ones that you could buy, and you can kind of hover over to see what the stats are, compare, and buy the one that's right for you. You can also use this to price check your own crafted parts to compete with the market and to try to make a profit. So another way just to look into it. Same thing if you're looking up missiles, missile launchers, or missile packs, really anything that's crafted. A lot of times people name their launchers something different than what's in here. So for example, if you go to like seismic, you have some that kind of keep the same naming convention, but at the bottom here you also have some that are a little bit different, right? And you never know what you're going to find here. For example, MLFO, this one's mine, M1 Space Bomb Booty Pooter. That's totally different. If you typed in Space Bomb Launcher, you're not going to find any products from me. So this is another way to good way to find, any products that might be on the Bazaar, and make sure that you can see every single one and then be able to compare the stats accordingly and get the best bang for your buck. That being said, we've covered reverse engineered, raw, and crafted parts. I want to cover something like, what if you get like a crazy unicorn and you can't find anything close to that stat on the Bazaar? So for example, I have this unicorn 118 top speed, which is pretty unicorn, but it's not like anything game breaking. There are some 119s and even 120 plus out there. So, however, on the Bazaar, I'm not going to see a lot of results for a part in this range. If I type in min value 118 and I hit add, there's nothing on the Bazaar. And sometimes you're going to get that. Sometimes there won't be anything. If I type in 7, I think I will have some results. And even, I mean, we already know the upper threshold doesn't have anything, so we can just leave it. No, there's not even a 117 raw on the Bazaar currently for sale. So what do I price this at? I have no idea. In that case, always go to a player Discord if you don't already know yourself and ask the player base for a price check. Most of the time, if it's really, really good, you might want to consider auctioning it, and I would highly recommend to never take any DM price that comes to you really quickly. Always take a day or two to sit on the part and make sure that you get a couple of offers so you can compare. And even, if you have multiple offers, legitimate offers from people who are interested, you might want to consider doing an auction on the forums. Alright, we covered a ton of stuff today, and I believe that is going to be just about everything that we are interested in. I'm going to add all of the different, different tools, links to the description of this YouTube video. I'm also going to add some of the Discord links to be able to join those Discords, and I'm going to add a informational page on how to look at your Spaceloot.txt so that you can make your own custom category or custom tiers and filters as well. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope it's very useful to you. I will catch you next